Hello, wine lovers! I am Raslava, sommelier and wine educator, your guide on this journey through the world of wines, spirits, and cocktails. Let's talk about wine aging and how it relates to wine quality. Should we pay attention to the vintage year on the label? When is a wine worth storing and that it's better to drink it as soon as practical? Here we are talking specifically about the aging of bottled wine, which is no longer undergoing any winemaking intervention. As with many things in our not so black and white world, well-known thesis wine only gets better with age is neither entirely true nor entirely false. Even we rephrase it as a good wine only improves with age, it would still be only partly correct. Yes, some wines do evolve and improve over decades. In rare cases, a few can do so as long as century. At the same time, there are wines where cork is better off never sealing the bottle, where flavor quality starts to decline almost immediately after bottling. All other wines fall somewhere along the spectrum between these two extremes. In fact, in the world of modern winemaking, only about 5–10% of wines improve during the first year of storage, and only about 1% continue to improve after 5–10 years. A wine's aging potential depends on several factors: a grape variety used, the weather conditions in the harvest year, the region of production, the winemaking techniques employed, and of course, the storage conditions. What exactly is the aging of bottled wine from a chemical point of view? Wine, besides water and alcohol, contains sugars, acids, and variety of phenolic compounds, including pigments, tannins, and aromatic molecules. These components slowly interact with one another over time, leading to the breakdown of some molecules and the formation of new ones. Oxygen, both trapped under the cork and gradually passing through it, unless wine is sealed with an airtight screw cap, plays a major role in this transformation. It oxidizes the wine's organic compounds, leading to major changes in taste and aroma. While the exact chemistry of wine aging is not fully understood, and the final result depends on many moving factors, several key processes that are important for understanding how wine evolves in the bottles is already studied. One of the most visually obvious changes is in the wine's color. Red wine, which starts out with a deep red-violet hue in its youth, gradually loses the violet components as it ages. It becomes lighter and redder, and over time takes on a brownish tint. This is due to the oxidation and aggregation of phenolic compounds, primarily tannins and pigments. These compounds eventually form larger aggregates that are heavily enough to precipitate out of wine, resulting in the loss of color intensity. This sediment is completely harmless, but it can be unpleasant when drinking, so it's usually removed through decanting. Because tannins precipitate along with pigments, the wine also becomes softer and less astringent. The softening is not only from the loss of tannins, but also from the oxidation loss that remains in solution. White wine, although naturally lower in pigments and tannins, also changes color as it ages. It goes from pale yellow to golden, then amber, and finally to brown. As in red wine, these changes result from the oxidation of phenolic compounds. That's why, over time, very old red and white wines often develop similar brown color. Another important change that occurs with aging is related to acidity. Although the acid molecules in the wine don't break down over time, they undergo esterification. That's it, they form esters with ethanol molecules. This process reduces the perceived acidity of the wine, and also it introduces new flavors, which may, since many esters are aromatic compounds. The aromatic profile of wine also changes. The pronounced and fruity aromas found in the young wine gradually fade, and this happens quite quickly. In fact, after just 6 months, wine begins to significantly lose the fresh fruit notes. However, over time, new aromatic notes develop, thanks to formation of complex ester, oxidation of certain compounds, and hydrolysis of various aromatic precursors. A well-known example for Riesling lovers, trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, a compound derived from carotenoids, which gives aged Riesling its distinct petrol note. I discussed this in detail in the video about Riesling. So, with aging, a wine's taste becomes softer in terms of tannins and acidity, while becoming richer, more complex, and full-bodied in flavor. But for all of these changes to actually enrich and enhance the wine, the components that undergo transformation might be present in the first place and in significant amount. If a wine starts off with a low acidity, it may simply become flat over time. If it has too few tannins, especially in red wines, it will lose structure as it ages. If it lacks precursor molecules that produce the secondary and tertiary aromas of aged wine, but once the fruity aromas fade, nothing replaces them, and the wine will just lose its character. So, the key conditions for successful aging are higher tannin content, especially for red, higher acidity, especially for whites which lack tannins, rich concentration of aromatic compounds. This combination depends mostly on the grape variety, the region where the grapes are grown, and the characteristic of the harvest year, since their conditions vary greatly from year to year and have a strong impact to wine chemistry. After that, almost everything depends on the winemaker. Of course, the wine must also be stored properly for aging to be successful. So, it is no coincidence the aging potential of certain grape varieties is described with a very wide range. For example, Riesling can age anywhere from 2 to 30 years, a rather dramatic difference to say the least. What are the life stages of bottled wine? The life of wine in the bottle is not simple or linear. It follows a curved progression. Immediately after bottling, the taste of a wine is not at its best. Wine is a delicate substance, and overhandling and transferring from tank or barrel into the bottle can disrupt its balance. During bottling, the wine is also exposed to a significant amount of oxygen, which triggers oxidation. Even though modern winemakers try to bottle under gentle conditions, often using inert gas to minimize oxygen contact, this cannot completely prevent the effect. As a result, the wine may go through a phase known as a bottle shock, a temporary condition where the wine loses its normal character and becomes dull or muted. Because of this, wine is usually not released for sale immediately after bottling. It needs time to recover. How long? That depends on the wine, usually several weeks. For example, champagne is left to rest for 6 months after final corking. Of course, champagne is not bottled in the conventional way before that. Its bottling happens before the second fermentation. But after disgorgement, the process of removing sediment, even champagne needs time to recover. Disgorgement is also a shock for the wine. So, right after bottling, any improvement in taste is not due to maturation, but rather to recover from a bottle shock. Still, it's an important phase in the life of wine worth remembering. Incidentally, bottle shock does not only occur after bottling. If the wine has been shaken during transformation, it also experiences shock, especially older wine, which tolerates shaking less well. In such cases, it is the best to let wine rest quietly for a few days. It will recover. Once the wine has recovered from shock, it enters a more stable stage of its life. If it has any aging potential, its taste will gradually improve until it reaches its peak. The more aging potential the wine has, the longer and smoother its journey to the peak will be. However, there is a nuance worth to know. Some high-quality, long-aged wines, Bordeaux for instance, or Chenin Blanc from Loire Valley, go through a temporary decline in taste somewhere along the way to their peak. A young wine in this category typically shows bold tannins, vibrant fruits, and strong aroma, robust but flavorful. At its peak, the same wine will display soft tannins and complex nuanced aroma. But in the middle of a journey, the wine may go through a down phase, which can last for a year or more. During this time, it may lose much of its aroma, and the flavor may become muted and less enjoyable. This does not mean the wine has declined permanently. It is not the beginning of its old age, it is a part of rebuilding phase. The wine is simply structuring its component. All you need to do is wait. In Bordeaux, this awkward period is sometimes referred as âge ingrat, or difficult age, reference to inhuman adolescence. There is a plateau after the peak when the wine holds its best flavor for a period of time. Again, the duration varies depending on the wine. Eventually, the wine enters a phase of gradual but irreversible decline in taste quality. A wine that has not reached its best is considered young. A wine at its best, a peak. and the wine that has begun to lose its character is simply old. As with our stages, this transition don't happen suddenly, it's very gradual. The longer a wine takes to age, the smoother the transition tends to be. The picture shows an approximate curves for some wine development, narrow peaks of an expensive mass-market wines, fast maturation and fast fading, and the wine stretching its peaks for great wines, vintage port that has not yet reached the peak at the age of 20, German high-quality Riesling with smooth peak at maximum at 10 years, and a curve of great Bordeaux wines with dip in the mid-maturation. British wine specialist Clive Colliers formulated what's known as a Colliers law of maturity. According to this principle, wine remains at its peak for as long as it took to get there. So if a wine reaches peak flavor at 10 years, it should stay at the plateau for another 10. It is important to note that this rule is generally applicable only to wines that age over a long time. If a wine reaches its peak in just 1 to 3 years, it will usually start to decline more quickly. Still, there are exceptions for every rule. Even among long-aged wines, there are those that don't follow this pattern closely. What's especially interesting is what Clive Colliers believed: the moment of peak is subjective and depends on the individual taster. Wine is a living substance, constantly evolving, and various processes with it occur at different rates. So, to one person with one set of taste preferences, the wine might seem perfect at 9 years, to another at 10, to someone else at 11. Following the logic, the length of a plateau would also feel different for each person. In this sense, we are clearly missing enough statistical data to be precise. Some wines technologically are made in such way that all aging takes place before the final corking, so by the time they reach the market, they are fully ready for consumption. There is no point to storing them in hopes to improve their taste. On the contrary, the wine will start to deteriorate. This applies to sparkling wines and fortified wines, such as sherry, Madeira, port, and others. Most of these wines require aging, and sometimes very long aging, but that process happens before bottling. Of course, as usual, every rule has an exception. Some vintage and premium champagne can be aged for 20 to 30 years, and some vintage ports may not reach their peak even after 20 years. There are also wines designed to be consumed immediately after fermentation, without any storage. A perfect example is Beaujolais Nouveau, made from Gamay grape. It reaches its peak just 3 months after fermentation ends. More about Beaujolais Nouveau in my video about it. Of course, this applies not only to Beaujolais, but to all Nouveau wines. Rosé, in general, are also made to be enjoyed young. Their charm lies in their freshness and brightness of their fruity aroma. Their peak falls within the first year, so with very few exceptions, rosé wines were best consumed within the first 2 years. By the way, the aging potential of rosé can often be guessed by its color intensity. According to the most common rosé production method, before fermentation begins, the juice is briefly macerated with the skin to transfer some pigments into the wine. In some cases, even the initial stage of fermentation occurs in the contact with skin. Along with pigment, tannins, which support aging, also passes to the wine. So, as a rule of thumb, the darker the rosé, the longer it can retain the taste quality. Good example of such structured rosés includes Rontavel, Bordeaux Claret, and Spanish Claret. They age well for 3-4 years, unlike their pale counterparts. Today, most inexpensive wines are made to be consumed right away. After 1 or 2 years, their taste quality begins to decline. This applies primarily to white wine and light, low tannic red wine such as Gamay, Lambrusco, Portugieser, Tarango, and simple Pinot Noir. Wine made from high tannins variety like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cinna Mavra can retain their quality up to 4 years, even in mass-market production. So wines like American boxed wines, European table wines, and branded products like Yellowtail, Mouton Cadet, and other inexpensive mass-market label should not be stored. Their taste will not improve, in fact, quite opposite. With higher quality wines, things aren't so straightforward. On average, the better the wine, the more different components it contains, and the longer those components interact with each other and with oxygen, the more complex the result becomes. Typically, aging is beneficial for such wines, and they are usually released in the market before reaching their peak. However, the time it takes to reach the peak varies greatly from wine to wine. A simplified rule says, the more tannins for red wines, or the higher the acidity for white wines, the longer the aging period required. That means the both grape variety and growing region determine the wine's aging potential, and whatever it needs to age at all. Some winemaking techniques, such as oak aging or limited skin contact for white wines, are designed to influence taste. I also introduce additional tannins, which is thought to increase the wine's aging potential. A rule of thumb: the higher wine's quality, the more it benefits from aging. However, even top quality wines made from certain grape varieties are actually better when young. A good example is Viognier wines, such as Sacardou from North Rouen. These wines have low acidity and an intense but delicate floral fruity aroma. As they age, the aroma fades and the wine becomes dull. Unless it's made from the old vines or it is a less harvested wine, even the best Viognier should be enjoyed within the first year. The same applies to New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Its first year is the best. It shares the same basic flavor profile with Viognier and suffers from the same loss of aroma over time. Most New World Sauvignon Blanc follow this pattern. However, Sauvignon Blanc from its rich birthplace, the Loire Valley, like Sancerre Polyphemie, has high acidity and can improve within a couple years in the bottle. What about red wines? In general, red wines made from Pinot Noir, Grenache, Sangiovese, Zinfandel, Cabernet Franc, Pinotage, Tempranillo, and Merlot require less time to age. Their peak typically comes within 8 years. Wine based on Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Nebbiolo, Tannat, and Cinna Mavra requires much more time. For example, top quality Bordeaux, Barolo, Barbaresco, and Rioja often needs at least 10 years, sometimes even 15 to 20 years, to reach their peak. Many people believe that only red wines benefits from aging, and the aging is bad for white wines. This is not true. Aging can open white wines just like it does with red wines. Again, it all depends variety and place. High quality German Rieslings reach their peak after 5 to 20 years. Alsace Riesling peak in 3 to 12 years. However, don't try age Californian Riesling. A New World heat kills the high acidity that Riesling needs to age well. The result is dull, flat wine. Hungarian Tokai and French Sauterne also benefit from 5 to 20 years of aging. Other whites that age well include white Burgundy, dry white Bordeaux, Chablis, and Chenin Blanc from Loire Valley. Speaking of aging, in general, Old World wines require more time to age than New World wine. This applies to both red and white wines. All this information brings us to the most important question for any wine lover. When will this exact wine reach its peak? Which vintage should I took on the market? And when should I take the bottle out of the cellar? Unfortunately, I don't have a definite answer. Of course, some estimates can be made, but not even the winemaker who created the wine can name the exact year. Take Bordeaux, for example. Let's say top Pomerol. According to the general knowledge, the wine needs 10 to 20 years to reach the peak. But the timing varies widely between different chateaux. Even within a single chateau, it depends heavily on the vintage. What was the weather like this year? For instance, 2005 and 2010 were excellent years for Bordeaux. Wine from those vintage need more time to mature. They taste better and will stay at their peak longer. On average, red wine from dry year takes longer to age. Why? Because the grape develop thicker skins, which means more tannins. In contrast, white wines from cool year age longer than those from warm year, thanks for their high acidity. Even a single batch of wine produced in one barrel can age differently depending on where it ends up. Different destinations, storage conditions, and shipping conditions all influence the outcome. And let's not forget about bottle size. There is the standard 750 ml bottle, the half bottle 375 ml, and the magnum 1.5 liters. Now, aging is primarily about oxidation. All bottles, regardless of size, have a similar neck volume, so the amount of oxygen available is roughly the same. This means Wine in a half bottle ages its peak faster than in a standard bottle. In a magnum, it matures more slowly. But be careful, faster aging does not mean that the wine ages the same quality in the less time. Not at all, it just means that it hits its maximum and that starts to decline sooner. Generally, the longer the path to the peak, the richer and more complex the flavor becomes. So longer aging is a plus. In short, a good vintage and a large bottle is both advantage. Now, how do professionals check the level of maturity in a wine? Through the regular tastings. Once a year or every 2 or 3 years, depending on how long the wine is expected to age, one bottle from the batch is opened and tasted. Some time ago, Frank Thomas, best sommelier of France and Europe 2000, together with the chemist and enologist Laurent Zenon, created and patented a device called Clove du Vin, the wine key. It's a small piece of stainless steel with a special metal alloy disc soldered on the tip. According to its creators, the disc acts as a catalyst, dramatically accelerating oxidation of the wine's tannins and acids. You dip key into the glass of wine, and it ages the wine by 1 year per second. And this is not mean metaphorically, but claim this is a precise numbers. The idea is to predict aging potential. You taste the wine while dipping the key, and when it tastes the best, that's how many years you should age it in the cellar. The Clove du Vin is now manufactured by the French company Peugeot. Yes, the kitchenware brand, not the car company. And it costs around $70. The debate over whatever it's really worth is still ongoing. But I seriously doubt that winemakers rely on it. Be aware that any bottle can suddenly become spoiled. TCA can occur, or the cork might dry out and crack. Wine can be overheated during transport or shaken too hard, again often during shipping. There are many ways wine's delicate nature can be harmed, and when it's happened to a well-aged wine that close to its peak, it's especially heartbreaking. It is easy to understand that the closer higher quality wine to its peak, the higher its price. The longer the merchant or the person who brought the wine and kept it in the cellar store the wine, the more their costs grow. There are storage costs, like the use of cellar space. After all, shelf space is limited, and each year brings new wines. And there is the risk. The longer the wine is kept, the higher the chance it could spoil. Every year, money is spent to store wine, and every year, risk accumulates. As a result, for the customers, the price increases with every additional year the wine spent in the cellar. There is one useful detail to know. When the wine reaches its peak, the price hits the maximum for the wine. But once the wine passes its peak, the price starts to drop. It is still good, decline starts very slow, but it needs to be sold quickly before it begins to deteriorate. The drop isn't dramatic, of course, but it's here. You can also build your own wine collection, aging wines yourself until they reach their peak. Whenever you're a collector or not, many of us end up keeping wine for long enough time. So, how do you store wine properly? Wine loves to lie down in a dark, cool, slightly humid place, like a toad in hibernation. Prolonging exposure to bright light is not good. Light catalyzes biochemical reaction, especially bad for sparkling wines. The ideal store temperature is between 10 to 13 degrees centigrade, 50-55 Fahrenheit, but range from 7 to 18, 44-65 is still acceptable. The perfect place is a deep stone cellar under the house. But how many of us have that? I wish I did, but no such luck. Another good option is a temperature-controlled space, a wine fridge or a room with air conditioning. They can be expensive and use electricity. Or you can rent space in a facility specialized for wine storage. Otherwise, choose the coolest room in your home. The worst thing for the wine is temperature fluctuations. It is better to have a slightly higher but stable temperature when one will swing up and down. So places like sheds, balconies or kitchens, where temperature shifts constantly, are the worst options. Temperature above 35 degrees centigrade, 95 Fahrenheit, are disastrous for wine. If your home turns into a sauna, say you live in Texas and your AC breaks, save your wine immediately. Drink it or put it in the fridge. Even 4 degrees centigrade is not ideal, but it's much better than 35. The higher the temperature, the faster the oxidation, and accordingly the quicker the wine maturing. That usually means the drop in quality, but it also means the wine will reach the peak and start to fade sooner. Keep it in the mind. Wine does not tolerate freezing or boiling. Don't torture it. Humidity is crucial for the cork. If the cork dries and cracks, it spells death for the wine. For the same reason, wine should be stored horizontally, so the wine keeps the cork moist. Store your favorite wine properly, and we will reward you generously. And finally, let's talk a little about artificial aging of wine. People are impatient creatures. We want everything here and now. We want to drink great wines, but we don't want to wait years for its reach to peak. On the top of that, long-term storage means extra cost and great risk of spoilage. So there always have been efforts to artificially age wine, ideally with result as good as the natural aging. Even the ancient Romans tried this. They placed wine in the smoke chambers or fireplace, hoping that the smoke would improve the flavor and speed up the aging process. Today, modern winemakers have greatly expanded the range of techniques. There is microoxygenation, originally developed to soften the extremely harsh tannins of grapes like Tannat. There is heating, the traditional part of Madeira wine production. Some even submerge bottles in the depth of the sea, using pressure as a tool for maturation. Wines have been exposed to radiation, ultrasound, magnetic field, even high voltage electric currents, all in purpose to mimicking what time naturally does. But so far, nothing has succeeded in replacement of the magic of good old-fashioned aging. Time remains the only proven master of transformation in the world of wine. Today I have Prestige from Chateau Pouchot, Languedoc-Assy 2019. Languedoc, French South, viniculture is on the rise there nowadays. Chateau Pouchot is now considered one of the best estates in Languedoc. It's not of whole southern France. The price at the same time is quite considerable. The estate was founded in 1981 by huge wine enthusiast Gerard Brou. The main varieties Grenache and Syrah. Later, all 60-year-old wines of Carignan and Wine Viognier, Marsanne and Roussanne were added, such as Roncet. Prestige, blend of Grenache 60% and Syrah 40%. Both varieties were fermented and matured separately. Maceration for Syrah 5 weeks, for Grenache 4 weeks. 25% of Syrah is matured for 12 months into 222 liters medium toasted Burgundy oak barrels. The rest of wine is matured in neutral material. For such wine, aging should serve well. This bottle is 7 years old. Should be near peak for quality for Grenache and Syrah. Let's try. This one for you, this one for me. Strawberry, black pepper, Provence herbs, wet forest. Full-bodied, powerful, but soft. Black cherry, plum, herbs, note of wood. Very long, pleasant aftertaste. Very good wine, somewhere near peak. Stay with me, subscribe to my channel. Feel free to ask questions and don't hesitate to support me. Sante!